This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
Joe, welcome, and thank you very much for being willing to talk to me. This is it's a treat for me. It really is, especially after talking with Jason and him, watching your interview with him and how well that went.
It's a pleasure, Chris. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I'm going to take you back a couple of years. Could you choose one or two stories from your childhood that you feel were important to who you've become today?
Well, I guess the probably the most important memory from childhood is during the war, 1943. I'm 8 years old, and just like COVID, people couldn't travel. World War II, who traveled? No street lights, nothing. So, but I started the war 4 years old, and now I'm 8 years old. We're well into the war by now, and I guess when you're brought up like that, you're a kid. What else? This is normal. This is not something like old age to be afraid of. No, but a lot of experiences, and once we couldn't go anywhere, I was entered into a local race, because we had local events. And a local event of 80 yards race, and I won that race. I had one big advantage. My grandfather, he founded J.W. Foster. And you probably never heard of J.W. Foster and Sons, but in 1904, he had three world records in his spike track shoes. He invented the spike track shoe. And in the 20s, the guys who actually immortalized in Chariots of Fire, he actually made their shoes. So so that's my grandfather, and that's J.W. Foster and Sons. Well, that company, my grandfather died before I was born. He died in 1933. I was born in 1935, some 18 months after. So I am now in 1943. I'm entered into a race, which I win, because I'm using my grandfather's spikes. I mean, you can imagine spike track shoes. How many kids had spike track shoes in 1943? One. One. So I won. I don't know whether that's cheating or a big advantage, but anyway, I won. And I go up to collect my prize. And what is my prize? My prize is a dictionary. I'm a kid. I'm 8 years old. Where's the football?
Yes.
What can I do with a dictionary? I didn't know at the time it was an American dictionary. And of course, it was Webster's. And I was later to learn that many of the spellings in there are much different. Well, not much different, but they are different than the UK spellings. So that's one of my memories. And of course, it becomes very important later in life. But that's one of my memories. I think the other memory is of where we were in Bolton, near to Manchester. Manchester was a target because of the docks and because of industry. So from our upstairs rooms, we could look across 8-10 miles away to Manchester. And when the air raids were on, we had the sirens, so we knew the air raids were there. We used to go into our shelter. Maybe that happened for about 6 months, and then everybody got tired of going into the shelters because they didn't want to drop bombs on Bolton. Bolton was totally insignificant. So we didn't bother going. We used to look through the bedroom windows and see all the flames. It's red glow coming from Manchester. So those are memorable. And I suppose really the air raid alarms, when the alarm went off, the sirens went off, and then when the all clear sirens came on. So those are memories which they just stay. So that's two memories of my growing up. And we didn't have any teachers. They were all in the army. So we had very little education during my first 10 years of life. Mother did a lot, of course, and we did have a few women who was teachers at that time, but you can't replace everybody. So we probably went to school we didn't even go to school because the school had been taken over during the war for, well, they call them air raid posts, and air raid posts meant that that's what, if anything happened, that's where you went if anything happened. So they were safe places of safety. So education was, I suppose, almost non-existent. But of course, we had books, and I had mother, so we did learn, and I could read, so that was okay. So I didn't do too bad, but it was probably I was 10 years old before we really got formal education again out of school.
So you mentioned that the American dictionary was important later in your life. How did that become important to you?
Well, we got to fast forward up to 1960. In 1958, because my brother and myself, we decided to leave the family business of J.W. Foster because, unfortunately, grandfather had died before I was born. His two sons took over, my father and uncle, and they were at war. They were at war with each other. You'll probably the story of Adolf Dassler and Rudolf Dassler, Adi Dassler and Rudy, and of course they couldn't get on either. They fought. Rudy had the good sense to leave and go and set up Puma. With the Foster family, they just kept feuding. They just kept fighting. So the company was going down. And Jeff and I, my older brother, we recognized this, and we sort of confronted father. Look, we need to do something. But all he could say is, Joe, when I'm gone and your uncle's gone, this company will be yours. You can do what you like with it then. Of course, it was very obvious to Jeff and myself. Look, Dad, we don't want you to die. We don't want you to go. Number one, we're not looking for you to go. But this company is going to go well before you. The way it's going on, it's going to be that. Would he listen? No. I don't know why, whether he and Uncle had gone through 2 world wars, and whether they were tired of something or whatever. I'm just happy to have a nice living, just go along. But Adidas had come into the country, Puma had come in, Adidas had taken the soccer market. And Jeff and I were saying, come on, during my grandfather's day, he supplied all the major football, soccer teams with boots and training shoes. Incredible. There were 90 of these teams. And now we were supplying none. We'd lost all that. So J.W. Foster had lost that business. So Jeff and myself decided we'd leave. We set up our own company. We did. We moved. We got a nice little factory. And we called ourselves Mercury Sports Footwear. And we were happy with that. And we were making money. We were selling shoes and we were making money. And our accountant said, Joe, you better register your name. What? What do you mean, register our name? We're Mercury. You can realize that we were quite naive. If we'd have set up as J.W. Foster, because both Jeff and myself are J.W. Foster, of course, it's your own name you can set up. You don't need to do anything like that. But that would be direct competition with the parent company, and we didn't want that either. So we'd set up as Mercury. Okay, so what do we register? Well, if you don't, and somebody else says, well, these Mercury shoes seem pretty good, why don't we make a few? Then you've got an argument then. Who owns that name? And you don't want that, so you want to register it. Okay. So he gave me the name of a patent agent to go and see and check out with. So I went to see him and said, we need to register this. Okay. He did his checks. He came back within a week and said, okay, Mercury is already pre-registered by British Shoe Corporation. Oh. They're massive. They're big. What can we do? Well, he said, I've been in touch and they'll sell you the name. Oh, great. Okay. How much do they want? He said £1,000. In those days, we'd just set a whole factory up for £250, machinery and everything. £1,000. And the bank wouldn't look at us for that. And we couldn't see how we could repay that. Never mind sort of have the opportunity to borrow it. No, we can't do that. Well, he said, you can take them to court because they're not using it. And for non-use, you can claim the use of it. I said, how much is that going to cost us then? He said, about £1,000. Oh. No. So I said, look, that's useless. We're not in that game. It was a nice day. I think it was early May and the sun was shining. He had his window open and he pointed to a sign, Kodak. I said, what's with Kodak? I said, well, it's their name. They invented it. They made it up. It's not one you pick out of a book or whatever. They made up that name. So that's the best way to get your name. So if you can bring me a name, make it up, fine. He said, but don't bring me one name. Bring me 10. Already I'm feeling destroyed. 10 names. You sit around the table and to think of one name is usually pretty difficult. To get 10, I said, do you realize we have to be in love with this? This is our passion. We want to succeed. We've got to love it. But he's a lawyer. He said, look, my job is just to see if you can have names. I went back, we sit around the table, we come up with all sorts of stupid names, but, we had Cougar, we had Falcon. Well, pretty good name, Cougar Sport, Falcon Sport. So we were following down sort of birds of prey, animals. Great. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Now, this is where the dictionary comes in, because we've been sat around the table and my dictionary is sat next to me. My Webster's American Dictionary is sat there. And I like the letter R. For whatever reason, I just like the letter R. So I open my Webster's Dictionary at the letter R and I start thumbing through. And it's not long before I come across R, E-E-B-O-K, Reebok. What's that? Small South African gazelle. We're a running company. Gazelle. Fabulous. That's it. Top of the list. I got the 10 names. We made up all sorts of names. I went back to the patent agent and said, look, these are 10 names, but we want that. We are already in love with Reebok. Again, it's like, we'll have to go through the process. He went through the process, came back. I think it took him about 2 weeks to go through this process. And he said, Joe, you've got your wish. The only one that's really clear that we can see that you should have is Reebok. Oh, okay, brilliant. Couple of problems. We've got, phonetically, we've got something called Reebok, and we have something called Railbrook. He said, but we're also the patent agents for Railbrook, so that's no problem. And Reebok is a woman's underwear company. So we don't, we don't think they will complain. So that's how we got Reebok. But the registrar, in his wisdom, he had a caveat. He said, we can only put you in the B section of the register. Well, up to probably a month before that, we didn't even know there was a register. So A section, B section, that's okay. Why is that? Well, if anybody comes to us or we learn of somebody making sports footwear out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Well, Jeff and I looked at each other and said, no, that'll never happen. That's impossible. That'll never happen. So it became Reebok. And 10 years later, the registrar came back to us and said, we moved you. So the A section of the register, oh, said, that's nice. Why is that? He said, because so many people now, almost everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports brand. And that's how we're Reebok. And that's the
I love that. So, okay. Along the way, who are some of the most important influences or mentors for you?
Well, I mean, we mentors and influencers, the words may have been in my dictionary, but they were not in common use in business in those days. So Today, it's everything, influencers, mentors. But I did have, I thought it good to become part of the industry. So we went out of our way to go to college and go and meet people. Going to college was a good thing because, and I guess they were our mentors in a way, because they taught us how to make shoes as against what we knew, making athletic shoes. They taught us an awful lot more about that. So, and within 15 miles of where we were was really a center for some of the footwear industry, mainly slippers and low price shoes. But there was a guy there called John Willie Johnson, and he had an enormous factory. He was happy to make 6p a pair, 6 pence, which is about 10 cents. So if he made 10 cents on a pair of shoes, he was very happy. So, but he made millions. He made a lot of them. And we're now at a time when footwear industry in the UK is in decline, because everybody now is going to the Far East. You could get the product less than half the price and a very good quality from the Far East. So throughout the UK, well, there's two regions. One is the Northampton, Leicester area. The other was Lancashire area where we were. Factories were going out of business, closing down. And so there was an auction, at least one auction every month. And I used to go to the auctions because we didn't have any money. The best thing was we could buy a sewing machine for £2. Brilliant. That was it. Fantastic. This guy, John Willie Johnson, he always used to sit on the front row, and he never made a bid for anything. But and this happened a lot, the auctioneer went around, he's trying to auction off a whole load of bits and pieces. Nobody bids. Well, the auctioneer would look at John, and John would just nod, tick it off. That was it. This intrigued me because he bought every piece of rubbish that you could think. You know, he was the clearance man, really. He was, everybody else bought machinery, and he was the clearance man. So it was on one occasion I bought an awful lot of leather, and I'd hired a van. I got in my van. I shouldn't have, but it was too much for my van, and my van is like a speedboat going up the. And of course, the policeman pulls me over. I'm overweight. I had to get weighed. I had to pay the fine and whatever. So next time when I'm talking to John, I can tell him I don't know if I made any money on that leather I bought because I got pulled over. So he said, Joe, he said, whatever you buy, look, tell me what it is. My men, after the sale, they come down and all this clearance stuff, they'll pick everything up and pick yours up as well. Because he was only 15 miles away from where we were. He said, and they'll deliver it to you. Oh, I said, thank you, John, that's fine. Then he suggested, why don't, instead of us both taking cars down 60, 70 miles where it is, why don't we go together? I said, fair enough, John, let's do that. I said, I'll come and pick you up. Well, I think he'd seen my car. So he said, you come along and park up and we'll go in my car. So I went along and I said, John, what do you do with all that? I didn't say rubbish, but all that stuff that you pick up at these sales. Oh, he said, come on. And he had a big old mill, a warehouse full of this stuff, and took me in. He got everything. Stuffed crocodiles, even a stuffed bear, all sorts of everything you could think of. But he had a machine there that was called a pounding up machine, which takes the wrinkles out. When you're lasting something, there's wrinkles, and you just put it on this machine, and so that's like an hammer, it beats it out. Oh, I said, John, pounding up machine. I said, can I rent that off you? Can I buy it off you? And he said, no. Oh, okay. He said, you can have it. Just give it me back when you've finished with it. Oh, thank you, John. I'll get somebody to pick it up. No, he said, no, you won't. My men will come down, they'll put it on your production line, and they'll fix it up for you. So that was the first. So many times I would say, Joe, I've got this machine. Would it be useful for you? And we must have had maybe 5 or 6 machines of him. And I'm sure that he thought Joe could do with that machine. And he probably used to buy it. And specifically then. So when you talk about mentors, when you talk about people who help you, he was probably the one that impressed me most, because he was such a genuine guy and so generous with his time and everything. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago when he was 90, because he was much older than me. I'm only 88, just a junior yet.
The youngin.
That's right, just young. But that was for mentoring. That was where the mentoring came from. It was really good, and help. Somebody would help you.
Yeah. So why did he buy all that stuff?
I think he just felt sorry for us, because when we were at the auctions and the auctioneer, I'd be bidding, and we'd eventually buy something. The auctioneer would say, "Okay, Joe, it's yours. We know that you've got more guts than money." So I think John Johnson took a bit of a shine to the idea that we were just scraping the barrel. We were at the bottom of everything, and still willing to let's go. Let's make it.
Yes. Yeah, it's good inspiration.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned over the years?
The valuable lessons is you've got to build a team. They have to have ownership. They've not got to be saying me, I. That's not part of team. They've got to be Reebok, and they've got to feel Reebok. So building that team, and you've got to listen to these people, because I brought a few things to the company, and the silhouettes and the name and the logo, but you need people, and you need to build a team, and they need saying, "Oh, we're Reebok. I'm Reebok." They need to be part of. So it's building that team. Egos. I had trouble. And if I got anybody with an ego, and sometimes you don't know their egos there until they're working for you, I would just invite them to move on. This is wrong. We don't want egos. We want people who want to be part of that team. So team building, I think that's probably the most, and being very honest. With your people, you've got to be honest. You've got to have integrity. If you have that, I think people trust you. And getting the people to trust you you're halfway there, because if they trust you, like John Willie, he obviously trusted us, so he wanted to help, and people want to help. So I think that's so important. And people, they ask me what are the 3 most important things about building and running a company, and I say, well, number 1, you got to have fun. If you're not having fun, it's going to be. And number 2, make it more fun. And number 3, it's got to be a real hoot. It has to be absolutely tremendously fun. And that way everybody else is having fun. And that way they don't realize they've turned up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they don't realize it's 10 o'clock at night when they're going out. It's like, they don't want to go home. And you're a family. And then you build a culture. And we were in the sort of trade where you could pick something up and you could see it. It has 3 dimensions, and a shoe does. A shoe has 3 dimensions. Apparel, really, unless it's on somebody, it's only got 2 dimensions. But a shoe has 3 dimensions. So it was something that people could relate to very nicely. And then we built a winning culture. We talk about our successes. We make successes, and you can do in sport, because it's visible. It's not like being an accountant and just getting another new account. It's like, no, this is something different. This is building things. So I think that's very important. But certainly listening to people, building a team that wants to work together, those are so important.
So a lot of businesses today are completely online, and mine is like that. So
Right.
what do you suggest for building that team culture when nobody is even in the same room?
Like you're asking me something I never had to have a problem with, because I'd step back before we got computers or smartphones or anybody knew what online was. Oh, And we used to do mail order. We used to sell because we would advertise in magazines and we'd do direct advertising and do direct selling. So in a way, we were sort of doing what's happening today, but we were doing it through a different medium. I mean, if you're doing these things, I think the same principles apply, and that is build your team. I think teams are still so important. If you can do that and you can create that buzz. Again, today, though, you mentioned influencers. Today, influencers are so important now. It's a totally different. When we got into aerobics, that's another story. But Jane Fonda actually bought Reebok, and she wore them on the television and on her fitness videos, and that was an influence. And she bought them. You know, could you do that today? No, that wasn't happening today. So we're in different times, and I'm spending time with people today. I'm with a guy. In fact, we're living in. We're here in Fort Lauderdale in one of his properties, and he's just written a book which is Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. It's a brilliant book. It's big, it's heavy, but brilliant. So and he's saying, "Oh, I learned an awful lot from you, George." And I said, "Yeah, but and we're doing this because I've been doing interviews at universities, and the question is, what was your exit plan?" Exit plan? We didn't have an exit plan. We just wanted to earn a living. We just wanted to be successful. So, entrepreneur, am I an entrepreneur or am I a brand builder? Because we built a brand. And I think there's you need to be an entrepreneur to build a brand, but not as Colin is. Colin is a serial entrepreneur. And today, that's what is happening. People are happy to sort of do something, take some money, put it on the table, start again. And so it's a lot different. And certainly over here in America, I mean, I love it. The guys, they go in there and they'll sell something for 30 million. And you've got 30 million. Oh, do you need $1 billion? Do you need to be a Musk or whatever? How much? But that becomes addictive. The idea of, we can start this and we can scale it here. To me, it was building a business. Now it's scaling.
Yeah.
And was it we used to change direction, which we did. We went to aerobics. Now it's pivoting.
Yes.
So many new things. Nothing's changed. The language has changed. The way you do things have slightly changed, but basically what it is about people, and it's about ideas, and it's about making your brand, giving it some credibility. If you can give your brand credibility, for us it was gold medals. That's that influenced people. Or if you supply a soccer team, these are the sort of things that influence in the sports brands. In others, then I think it's still the same. What you have to do is to find out, how do people get to know my brand, and how do people want to buy my brand? And I can go back to 1895. My grandfather set up his company, and he invented the spike running shoe. By 1904, he'd given his shoes to people, and one was Alf Shrub, and Alf Shrub broke 3 world records in one race in Glasgow.
Gosh.
3 world records. And from then on, it is the influences. Who he used to give his shoes to commentators, to people who wrote the articles, and try my shoes, and then they write an article. These are wonderful shoes, they're the best shoes. And he used to advertise. And one of the adverts, we picked this up because when Reebok started to grow, scale, we decided to look back into the history of J.W. Foster, my grandfather, and because we were local to where he started his business. He used to advertise in the local newspapers and things like that. And one of the adverts we found was, if you don't believe that Foster's spikes are the best you've ever worn, we'll give you £100. Now, if you can think, in the early 20th century, the 1905 to 1910, £100, that must be like £10,000 today, because it's an
Yes.
incredible amount of money in those days. But he was able to, he advertised like that. And he used to advertise, again, our shoes are worn by, and he used to list down all the top runners who'd won gold medals and what he used to. So he knew how to influence. And I think influencing, okay, it's changed slightly. Now it's a bit more open. You've got to pay for this, as against just give a product. But it's a way of, and you've got to work out, figure out which way how do I get the influence into my business.
That is an excellent point. And it's interesting that it really hasn't changed much over the years.
Just the method.
So what is something in business that most people don't see? So I'm talking about business people, when we get all excited and we're starting out and we're just getting going. What is it we fail to see at that point?
I think a lot of people just looking for business and don't realize or don't take into consideration, am I going to enjoy this? Is it going to be a fun thing to do? Because if it isn't, you're likely to fail. You've got to be 24/7. It's got to be in your mind. It's got to be in and with the people. So I think today, certainly, if you're just thinking, well, I can start, I can scale, I can exit, I can repeat, but how many of those can you love? And will you be successful unless you have that mentality? And I think the guy that we're staying with, I think he has that mentality. That is his fun. His fun is not the product. His fun is the game.
Yes.
And and I think you have to decide what is going to be your fun. Is it building something for a long time? We built a business with Reebok, and if you take the family back, you've got to go back to my grandfather in 1895, and here we are now in 2023. It's 128 years, is that something like that? So that's a long time. And even with Reebok is now it's coming back. It was bought by Adidas, but Adidas were really interested in the assets rather than in actually growing or scaling Reebok, and they took some assets and put it into Adidas. But Reebok persisted, and eventually it's been sold to ABG 2 years ago, and ABG. Well, the problem with Adidas is that they didn't run them as independent companies. They pushed everything into one. So all the offices, the Reebok was in the Adidas office. Everything that Adidas did, Reebok was in there. So separating that is like, you've almost got to get a surgeon in there to cut it.
Yes.
Out. And so that's taken a couple of years. But ABG, their strength is they've got massive distribution globally. So all they did was to make arrangements with different people. And we were in India, Julie and I were in India earlier this year, and we met up with a new team for India. And they have a license for 40 years. Yeah, I mean, that's a commitment. But
Wow.
that's the way ABG work. They work on this. We've got some good partners. Now, you can have this. So ABG paid $2.5 billion for a company that was supposed to be worth. Originally it was sold for $3.6 billion, but when Adidas were going to sell it, people said, "Well, at the best, $1 billion. At the best, $1 billion." Now, but ABG paid $2.5 billion. Reason, and this is a good reason, because Jamie Salter, who is the CEO, he also has the brand for Shaquille O'Neal. He has his brand. But Shaq is also 15% of ABG. And it's just quoted that every time Shaq comes to see me, the first thing he talks about is Reebok. Why don't we buy Reebok? And the last thing before he's going through the door, the last thing he talks about is Reebok. Are we going to buy Reebok? So we bought Reebok. and the good thing about that is Shaq wanted it. Now, that's good. It's like you talk about, in a business, you've got to want it. You really
Yes.
want it. It's no good to say, well, we can make something out of this. No, you've got to want it. Because that way you'll spend that extra little bit of time, that little bit of thinking, that little bit, even if it's not money, you'll make people believe you. This is going to be it. And if people believe you, they trust you. And then you've got to make sure that you do that right. But if you can believe in it yourself, other people will believe. It's if you don't believe, it's going to be hard to sell something that you don't believe in yourself. So having Shaq there, he is now, and I think they've just appointed Shaq as the president of basketball. And Reebok are going back into basketball, big way. Big way, and I love that because and he's also said, we're right now we think we're number 3, but we're going to head for number 1. Nike are way above that, but if you don't dream that big, you never achieve it. You've got you're not got to aim for number 3. You've got to aim for number 1, and and keep on pushing, because that way you can achieve it. And it's the same with any business. Where do you want to be? How successful do you want to be? If success is the amount of money I can make, well, that's one thing. People can live with that, and in certain industries, you can do that. I think in the sports goods industry, though, you've got to be in love with it. You've got to have something more, and that probably applies to a few industries where there's a visibility of that industry, where it is visible. So, I think Reebok, fortunately, are back on a winning track again now, and it is fabulous. We love it. I mean, we've been this year, Julie and I have been to Australia, Singapore, Dubai, India, just meeting the Reebok teams. And previous to that, we've been to Panama, and we've been to Canada and met up with the Reebok teams there. And the one thing that, okay, I'm not involved in Reebok, but I'm the founder. And the one person they can't change is a founder, no matter how far you change CEOs, CFOs, you can change all the other people, but you can't find a new founder. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, it carries a lot of weight.
That's right.
So along the way, what's one of those aha moments you had where you thought in business, oh, this is how it really works? I never would have known that. And it wasn't until you reached a certain level in your development that you were able to look back and say, okay, now I get it.
Well, I guess really it's a question of we keep on taking one step. Just because, we want to grow our business in those days or scale it, we want to see how far we can take it, and I think that really, okay, it was fantastic when we actually broke into the American market. After me spending 11 years going to the NSGA and trying to, and lots of failures. Failed that many times. You think, well, okay, but we succeeded because we got into Runner's World. We got ratings, 5-star ratings for 3 of our shoes. That was a great attraction. That sucked us into the market then, because people read about this. Oh, Reebok, let's buy a pair of Reebok. So that was a moment of, wow, yes, now we know. What's the influence? 5 stars were definitely a big influence. But really what it was about is, we were looking for white space all the time, because you got big guys like Nike, Adidas, Puma, they're around you, and they're sucking out the best of everything because they're big, they can put the money behind it. So we look for the white space. Was where are they now? Local to us, and in the UK, the running business, the athletics, track and field, we could start to own that, mainly because the 3As produced a handbook. And in that handbook, every club was affiliated to the 3As, every club, and about 300 clubs. And I had the name and address of every secretary. So all I had to do was to contact all these people and give them an agency. They become an agent for Reebok. So I ended up with about 250 agents. And so we actually owned that market. We just owned that market. We said, well, okay, now we own this market. Where do we go? Where's the white space? Where is the space for us to move? And in the UK, there's a sport, it's rugby, but it's rugby league. And rugby league is quite specific to the north of England. So we could go in there again. I could knock on somebody's door. I didn't need to do much more than knock on somebody's go in, give a couple of pairs of boots and whatever. So we started to own this white space. And because when we got to America, I said, I've gone into America. That wasn't white space. That was a bigger market. It's like, what do you do? How do you expand your business? How do you scale it? Do you put more product on the market? Do you move from running and athletics into football, soccer? Soccer was owned by Adidas. Now, what do you move into? Do you do that, or do you expand the territory? So instead of just selling in the UK, and of course, that being the UK, the UK has a Commonwealth. So Canada, we already had Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India. With a lot of those we're still selling to. So that was a bit of a sort of a white space for us because they all spoke English and they all wanted to buy English. So that was good. Getting into America, I know I'd been dealing with a guy, even at first, I'd been dealing with a guy called Frank Ryan. Frank Ryan was head coach with Bob G and Jack at Yale University. But he was getting a bit older now, so he didn't really want to get involved with Reebok. But I knew that in there, every college, every university has coach. And coach is king. He's top of the tree. That's it. And you can go there on a sports scholarship. So I knew that was, if I could get into America, I didn't realize it would take me 11 years. But
Wow.
it's a big market. And how do you influence such a big market? But we got in with running. And we'd grown there. We became a $9 million business. And then that white space appeared, aerobics. We're not known by many people. But a $9 million business, people don't know you. We were a very small minnow in this big pond of running in those days. And then we hit on aerobics. It was our tech rep in Los Angeles, who his wife is coming back from these classes, and she's full of it. It's wonderful. And he said, Frankie, what are you doing? Oh, we're doing exercise to music. Really? What's that? It's called aerobics. Oh, what? What's aerobics? Well, he went down to the next class and lesson, and he looked it over. Half the girls were wearing sneakers. We think they were New Balance. The instructor was wearing the same sneaker. The other half of the class, they were not wearing any sneakers, no footwear. And it struck him, why don't we make a special shoe just for aerobics? That was white space. And he wanted it made out of glove leather, just simple, white. And by that time, we had the Union Jack on the side. And that itself is a different story because shortly after I got Paul Fireman on as my USA distributor, he was going to have the USA, and we had the Road Star, which was a star as our logo, which was great. But Paul said it looks a bit like the Union Jack, and yeah, it does indeed. He said, "Look, Joe," he said, "it's going to cost us an awful lot of money to get everybody in America to recognize the Road Star. Can we use the Union Jack?" Because he said, everybody in America knows the Union Jack. Oh, that surprised me a bit, but okay. I said, well, they'll kill us in the UK if we put the Union Jack on because these shoes are made in the Far East. I said, but I'm willing to suffer that if you think this is going to be a good idea. And so we put the Union Jack on. So you got a Union Jack on each shoe, and then the lid of the box was a Union Jack. So with all these Union Jack, and in those early days, we didn't have much point of sale stuff for the retailer. So the retailer used to stack the boxes in a pyramid and put a shoe on each of the boxes that went up there. And that caught on. So almost every independent retailer, a lot of independents knows it, they all had this pyramid of Reebok boxes. So the Union Jack there was just, yeah, we almost did get killed in the UK. We got about we had about a dozen court cases. They took us to court, yeah, but you can't do this. These are not made. But we said, look, they're designed in the UK. We get a royalty on every shoe. Why can't we use the Union Jack? We have British Airways flying Boeings with a Union Jack on the tail. Yeah, we put all sorts of, and they used to fine us £1 because we were guilty, but £1, that's all. Eventually, we came to an agreement with the I don't know what to call them now, but with this group, and I think we paid something like 5,000 to stop it.
Oh my goodness!
It just got stopped, and even though on the side of every shoe we had a big hang tag, made in Korea.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, made in South Korea. But it worked in America. It worked, and okay, so we got this nice glove leather shoe. I didn't know at the time that Arnhill had asked for this shoe in glove leather, because to me, you don't make a shoe out of glove leather. You make gloves out of glove leather, because just like a piece of paper, you can tear it. It's that easy. And of course, that's what happened. The shoe started falling apart. Had we been in any other country, or even in any other place than Los Angeles, USA, we would have been dumped. We would have been thrown out. No. But the girls loved them. They loved them that much. They didn't care if they only lasted 4 weeks. They went out and bought another pair.
Oh, no.
Oh, but then, and I'm saying, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, they're tearing apart. Okay, you can't do that. So what they did, to strengthen it, they lined it with nylon. That gives it more strength. Okay, so I said, look, you can't do that, guys, because you're stopping it breathing. The benefits of your leather is it breathes. So what did they do? And this is a lesson that marketing beats manufacturing every time. They punched holes in the front to allow it to breathe.
Oh my goodness.
So that was a great lesson for me in marketing. Yes, and they got away with the soft leather. In fact, that's the one thing in America that changed Reebok, is that Reebok were responsible for the nice soft leather, which now everybody uses a soft leather. You don't have to break them in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so many shoes previous to that, by the time you got broken in, sort of thing, they're almost worn out. We suffered so much. I remember that again. This was one of the agencies. I think it was Sol Gold. I don't remember his agency, but they put the advert in because we moved into tennis and these nice soft shoes. And the advert was, if you don't believe that the Reebok tennis shoes are the best shoes we've ever worn, it's a bit like my grandfather, isn't it? It's the best shoes we've ever worn. We'll replace your shoes and give you a can of balls. So the strip line was Reebok puts its balls on the line. Which
I love it.
Yeah, which is great. So, and I think, we talk about a brand. A brand should have fun, should be able to see the funny side and enjoy life. So, yeah, but that was the big white space that took us from 9 million to 900 million in 4 years. So that was the big thing. We're talking about what was big. And
that was huge.
It was giant. Well, we overtook Adidas and we overtook Nike at that time. We became number one in the late 1980s.
Just from picking the right white space.
That's right. And not being worried about it. So we came from being a running company to being a woman's company. All of us were a woman's company. And the decision was to make the aerobics shoe on a woman's last, just in women's sizes. So once they started to rocket, all the men were saying, can we have something like this? Can we have a piece of this? So eventually we went into different models, not just aerobics. I think was for training and things like that. And then it goes, when we got big enough, when we got that big, we could move into other sports. We could move into basketball, football, And I don't know how much we got into baseball, whether we did or not, but we got into the. I don't think we particularly worried too much about cleated sports, but so basketball and tennis, they were the two where you could wear that same shoe on the street.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It started the whole sneaker revolution.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The airports. I know there's a quote from, I think it was Rob Strasser, who worked at that time for Nike. And he said, "Oh, we're done." Because every time we went to the airport, he saw all these Reeboks around.
So, what are some parting words of wisdom that you have?
I think the parting words of anything, I don't know whether it's wisdom or not, but certainly I've said you've got to have fun, you've got to create teams. And the important thing also is to like people and to listen. So listen to people. There's so many people out there, many more ideas than you have. I stepped back at 55 and people said, "Why? You're young." I said, "Look, this is a very young sport. People coming in now, people who are sort of late teens up to 30 years old, they've got different ideas than I have. We need those. We need the new ideas. Even if they fail, you'd still need the ideas. You still need to do the change. So definitely be open for other people's ideas and listen. That's the best thing I can say to people. And okay, take the risks. They are calculated. And if you're wrong, change. It's as simple as that. But the worst thing you can do is not make a decision. Whichever way you go, you've got to make that decision. And I say, if it's wrong, and same with people who work for you. Don't let them come to you every time scared of the fact that they're scared of what you might say if they make the wrong decision. No, you invite them to make the wrong decisions. Just take us into a different place. Take us somewhere different. Arnold, he brought aerobics. Okay, his decision was to do it in glove leather. It was wrong, but you could change it. And eventually we got something more like a clothing leather, which was more substance to it. Because glove leather is only 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter. When you start working on it, that is like, so you end up with 0.7 of a millimeter thickness. And
yeah,
that goes wrong. But I would have never thought of using glove leather, so we would probably never got to a soft leather. So
yeah.
And that's because you invite people to do. And I just said, Paul Feynman, look, Paul, don't ever learn how to make shoes. Don't, because that will take away the ability to think differently. Because you'll always think like a shoemaker. It has to have this, it has to have that, it has to have the other. And you'll start making shoes like everybody else. You've got to have that willingness to change and think, okay, like I say, the glove leather was wrong because it wasn't strong enough, but you can work on it and work on the idea to get something that does work.
Yeah.
So
that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for talking to me today. It's an
absolute pleasure.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it very much.
Good. And I enjoyed it too. It's great. I get a lot of chances to talk about Reebok, and I can never tire of that because, again,
it's your passion.
Passion. Absolutely. It's a passion. And that's another thing. Make sure you've got a passion for what you're doing, that you really love it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.